Hi, my name is Pastor Dedra, and I thank you for joining me tonight on my first podcast called it's a meditation moment, and it's the name of the podcast is Live in the Word with Pastor Dedra. Um, I'm happy that you joined me tonight. I started my ministry in 2019, and the Lord spoke to me about he gave me the word podcast, but he didn't tell me anything else. And shortly after that, I had some visitors at the church, and I was sharing it with them with the word podcast. I said I didn't know what that meant, and one young lady said after church, she said, "I know what it means because her pastors had a podcast," and she told me how it went and everything like that. And then, of course. I was like, oh, okay. But, I never really pursued it. And then COVID happened. And then since then, I've heard a lot of other people talk about podcasts. So it was a blessing when I heard about this ministry and that allowed me to be here with you tonight. Um, Again, my name is Pastor Dedra Martin, and I am bringing you greetings from Soul Outreach Christian Church and Ministries. We're located at 11475 Commercial Lane in Laurel, Delaware. And my presiding prelate is Bishop Weldon M. Johnson. And tonight, meditation moment we're going to talk about you can overcome. You can overcome. Many times in life, we face a lot of stresses. A lot of people are going through a lot of stuff, situations, circumstances. Some people don't know how they're going to pay the light bill, how they're going to pay the rent, and how they're going to do this and how they're going to do that. And sometimes situations just happen one on top of the other, on top of the other, and you just very stressed out. And sometimes you get burned out. You're like, Lord, what? But we're here to give you a word of encouragement on tonight that you can overcome. You can overcome. And I know that with the pandemic, people had faced some economic challenges because of the pandemic, and because of the natural disasters that have happened. People have faced a lot of devastation and just different things going on, troubles, trials, and situations. But again, you can overcome. And tonight, we're going to talk about the life of David. David went through a lot of stuff, a lot of struggles in his life, but God protected him through it all. He was humble, but yet he rose to meet every challenge that was put before him. God protected David. So let's look at David's life. And let's see, maybe you can find yourself in some of David's situations. But again, if God did it for David, certainly he can do it for you. Now we know the story started with David um, when they were looking for a king. And the prophet Samuel, the Lord has sent him on assignment. He said, I want you to go to the house of Jesse, and the king is somewhere in his house. Jesse had 8 sons. So the prophet Samuel told the Lord, well, I can't just go up and say, I'm looking for a king because, somebody might try to kill me. The Lord said, well, I want you to go and I want you to say that go and offer a sacrifice. He said, take an offering with you and tell them you're here to offer a sacrifice. So when the prophet came, they were all anxious and worried. He said, I'm just here to offer a sacrifice. And God said, invite Jesse and his kids to this sacrifice. So what they did was Jesse presented all of his sons to Samuel. And Samuel was like, oh, yeah, this must be the one. The Lord said, nope, not him. And so Jesse would bring the next one out. He said, oh, yeah, Lord, this must be the one. The Lord said, nope, not him. And so Jesse had 7 sons that he presented to Samuel. and neither one of them was the king. Samuel said to Jesse, excuse me, well, do you have any more kids? Jesse said, well, yeah, I do. There's one out in the field. His name is David. So Samuel said, look, we're not going to go anywhere or do anything until we see this child. So, and David was the youngest of them. So David came, the prophet stood up, and the Lord said, that's him. He's the one. And so Samuel anointed David to be king. But nothing happened right away. He just anointed him to be king. David went back doing what David did in his father's house. And so it came one day that three of Jesse's sons joined Saul's army. And Jesse said, well, I want you to go, David. I want you to go and check on your brothers. But not only just check on them, I want you to take them some food and take the captain some cheeses and stuff like that, just see how things are going. And so David just did what his father told him to do. And at this particular time, there was a battle getting ready to start between the Philistines and the Israel army. And so David and the champion Goliath was in the midst of it all. He would come out and taunt Saul's army every day, saying, why don't you just send some man down to fight me? And whoever wins, they get to be the ruler. So he did this every day. And when David got there, David looked and he's like in amazement. He's like, who is this uncertain Philistine that would dare challenge the army of Saul? I mean, David got righteous indignation. That's what the Bible said. I mean, he was wholly angry that this man was challenging the army of God. And his brother's like, shh, 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 shh. And his brother's like, David, what are you here? What are you trying to cause trouble? And David's like, what did I do? I didn't do anything. I'm just talking to this man that's trying to challenge y'all. And then David turned to the other people. What did I do? What did I do? And so David went back again, and the giant kept challenging. And David went to Saul. He told Saul, I will challenge the giant. Mind you, David was just a kid. And the giant said, you're going to allow this kid, I'm just paraphrasing now. I'm paraphrasing. You're going to allow this kid, because he was a young man. You're going to allow this kid to challenge me? What am I? What do you think of me? He said, but if you want to, I'll challenge him. So in preparation for the battle between David and Goliath, Saul said, well, David, you need to prepare for this battle. I want you to put on my armor, and here are my weapons. And so he put on David. David's like, I can't use this. This is your stuff. I'm not comfortable with this. Let me fight with what I'm used to fighting with. And so because David, while tending his father's sheep, he had killed a lion, he killed a bear with the very same weapon that he was getting ready to use on the giant. So David said, let me use what I use. So David had a slingshot and 5 stones. That's what he used. And so the day of the challenge, David and the giant were faced off. And David said to the giant, he said, you come with a sword and a spear, but I come in the name of the Lord. And it said David and the giant ran to each other. David ran to him and said, David threw his slingshot and he threw the stone, and it sunk in the middle of the giant's forehead and killed him dead. Now, you know that had to be the power of God. Number one, because of David's height in comparison to the giant, the velocity needed for his stone to even reach the giant's head had to be great. But for it to really sink into the giant's head, you know it had to be the power of God on David. God protected David. And so, so then things were pretty good for David. Saul invited him to be part of the army. He became friends with Saul's son, Jonathan. He married Saul's daughter, Michal. Everything was good for David. He would go out, they would go out, they would fight the battles and stuff until one day when the people sang a song. It said, Saul killed 1,000 and David killed 10,000. And it's at that point in time that Saul became jealous of David. And from that time on, he sought to kill David. He threw a javelin at David, but God protected David from that. Another time, Saul's very own son, Jonathan, protected David. He knew Jonathan and Michal, David's wife, both knew that their father wanted to kill David. So one time, Jonathan helped save David's life, and the other time, Michal helped save David's life. But then David knew that he had to flee. So where was he going to go? So eventually, David ended up, he was weaponless and he was hungry. And it's during these times that many of the Psalms that you read in the book of Psalms, many of the Psalms were written by David. Many of the Psalms were written at this time. Some of the Psalms were written at this time when David was going through. So weaponless and hungry, David went first to the prophet that anointed him, Samuel, at Ramah. Then eventually he went to Nob. Now listen, this is David. This is how God gave David wisdom and he protected David. He went to Nob, the priest of Nob, and where he pretended to be on a secret mission for Saul. Now, he was not on a secret mission for Saul. Saul was trying to kill him. But he told the priest of Nob he was on a secret mission for Saul. They gave him food, not just any food. They gave him the shewbread that the priests eat out of the temple. They gave him spiritual help, and they gave him the sword of Goliath that actually was a trophy in their temple. Well, and then David went on his way. But when Saul heard about it, he killed all 85 of those priests. So David went on his way, and he had to leave Israel to save his life. So where did he go? He went to Philistia, and this is in the territory of Gath, and the king Achish, he was the king of Gath. There, David was recognized as Goliath's killer. So he pretended to be insane in order to avoid death. Now, David went through some stuff. That's not all of it, but he went through some stuff. And you can read about that in 1 Samuel 21, 10 and 15. And two of the Psalms during that time that he was in Philistia with the king of Gath and pretended to be insane, David wrote two of the Psalms, Psalm 54 and Psalm 56. Let's read Psalm 54 and Psalm 56. And it gives you a little bit of insight into what David was going through. Psalm 54. Save me, O God, by thy name, and judge me by thy strength. Hear my prayer, O God. Give ear to the words of my mouth, for strangers are risen up against me. Oppressors seek after my soul. They have not set God before them. Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is with them that uphold my soul. He shall reward evil unto my enemies, cut them off in thy truth. I will freely sacrifice unto thee. I will praise thy name, O Lord, for it is good. For he hath delivered me out of all trouble, and mine eyes have seen his desires upon my enemies. So David, he was crying out to God, but still in the same breath, he was giving God praise and thanks in advance for doing it. Amen. Sometimes you have to give God praise in advance for doing it. You might be going through some troubles or trial situations, whatever, but give God praise in advance for doing it. Let's do Psalm 56, because I don't want to take up too much of time tonight. Uh, be merciful, Psalm 56. Be merciful unto me, O God, for man will swallow me up. He fighting daily, oppressing me daily. I mean, David had to pretend he was insane. They were after him daily. He says, my enemies daily will swallow me up, for they be many that fight against me, O thou most high. What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. David said he's afraid, but I'm going to trust in you. In God, I will praise his name. In God, I have put my trust. I will not fear what flesh can do unto me. Every day they wrest my words. All their thoughts are against me for evil. So every day they're taunting him. They're picking at him every day. He said they gather together, they hide themselves, they mark my steps when they wait for my soul. So they're following David and they're tracking him and they're just taunting him. He said, shall they escape by iniquity? In thine anger cast down the people, O God. Thou tellest my wanderings. Put thou my tears into thy bottle. Are they not in thy book? So David's like, I'm crying. I know that you see my tears. When I cry unto thee, then shall mine enemies turn back. This I know. For God is for me. In God will I praise his name. In the Lord will I praise his word. And God have I put my trust. I will not be afraid what man can do unto me. Thy vows are upon me, O God. I will render praises unto thee, for thou hast delivered my soul from death. Wilt not thou deliver my feet from falling, that I may walk before God in the light of the living? That's David. I mean, doesn't that sound like he was in distress? You know, he was going through some stuff daily. But yet God delivered David. Now that's all when he was in Philistia with King Achish of Gath. Okay, so let's look on a little bit more of what David went through. Okay, eventually David returned to Israel and hid in a cave at Adullam, located about 15 miles from his home in Bethlehem. At Adullam, he began to gather an army about him. The cave became David's headquarters. When the Philistines attacked the Israelite town of Keilah, David and his army rushed to the rescue. But listen what happened. Saul heard about it. He heard that David was at Keilah, and he prepared another expedition to kill him. David escaped again, but Saul continued to hunt David like an animal. But David was successful in hiding in the wild mountainous regions. Twice David had the opportunity to kill Saul, but he refused to touch God's anointed. He left Saul in God's hands. That's some wisdom for some people on tonight. Sometimes you got to leave your mouth off of people and leave them into God's hands. That's the best thing to do. David has some wisdom. He left Saul in God's hands. So, because he had to leave Keilah, David left Israel again. So where did he go? Guess where he went? He went back to Philistia, the Philistine territory again, with the king Achish of Gath. But this time, he didn't have to pretend he was crazy. He didn't go as a fugitive. This time, he went as a leader of 600 men. So he went as a leader, and David and his army became mercenary soldiers with Achish, the king of Gath. Now, this is David's story now. So the king Achish of Gath gave Ziklag a city. He presented the city Ziklag to David as his headquarters. Achish believed that David raided Israelite towns. But guess what David was actually doing? He told the king he was raiding these towns, his hometowns. But actually, what he was doing was distributing goods to the towns. That's God gave David wisdom. And then something happened that really would have blown David's cover in Philistia, in the Philistine camp. War broke out between the Philistines and Israel. But the Philistine leaders would not trust David to be part of their army, so they sent David back to Ziklag. So God protected David's cover from being blown. Because when David got back to Ziklag, you remember the story how when David came back from a battle, he went back to Ziklag and the Amalekites had taken his women and children. And David asked the Lord, Lord, should I pursue? And the Lord said, pursue. So David was busy going back into the enemy's camp, getting his own stuff back when the war between the Philistines and Israel took place. So David's cover was never blown. That's how God protected David. The hand of God was upon David, and David became king, which he was purposed to be. If God can do it for David, certainly he can do it for you. Maybe some of the things that David went through, maybe you're dealing with. But when God wants you to cast all your cares upon him, because he cares for you. That's 1 Peter 5:7. God cares for the affliction of every one of his children. He wants he wants us to give him our fears, our anxieties, and our concerns because he cares for us. So just think about everything that David went through, but yet in the midst of everything he went through, he talked to God. So the key is, if you're stressed out, if you're anxious, if you're angry, whatever the situation may be, give it to God. Pray about it. Well, well, Lord, this is going on, that's going on, but yeah, I talk to God and that's it. But really, when you talk to God, really talk to him. Tell him how you feel. Pour out like David did. David said, don't you see me crying here? I'm going through. But God, I know that you're going to help me. So you got to do just like David did. Pour out to God. Pour your heart out to him. Let him know how you feel. Tell him your concerns. Tell him your worries. Tell him what's bothering you. Because he really does care. And you let him handle it. And you rest in him. And rest in him. So when you pour it out to him, you just you should feel a little bit better after you get some relief. So you know how when you going through something and you talk to somebody, you feel a little bit of relief. You a little bit of the stress is taken off of you. It's like feel better now and talk it out. Sometimes you just need to talk it out. Talk to God. Talk it out to him. Talk it out to him. And that's what he wants you to do. That's how you build relationship with God. Talk it out to him. Pour out your heart to him. Let him have it. He wants every problem, every concern that you're going through, and he will fix it. He will deliver you. He will give you a peace that surpasses all understanding. But just give it to him. You can't handle it on your own. Just give it to him. He's someone who's trustworthy. He's not going to run around and tell your business to other people. He's God. He has a listening ear. You can trust and depend on God. He hears your cry. And he's just waiting for you just to pour out to him so that he can show you who he is. I'm God. Let me fix this. Let me do it. Let me show you that I am God. So pour out your heart to him and release it. Whatever it is, release it. And what God will do is, he'll give you a peace. You'll feel a relief when you release it to him. But also, you have to, be listening for him to give you instruction. Sometimes he will fix it himself. Sometimes through other people, or he would just turn situation. He would just do whatever. He speak to people's hearts. He would do whatever. But sometimes he may want to give you some instruction. So always, keep a listening ear. So when you pray, don't always just get up and say, "Oh, okay, I'm done." When you pray, just wait a few minutes, meditate, because God may want to tell you something. He may want to give you some instruction. And it might sound silly to you what he's asking you to do, but how many of you know that he takes the foolish things of this world to confound the wise? Huh? He's God. There's nothing too hard for God. Jeremiah asked the question, is there anything too hard for God? No, nothing's too hard for God. He can do it. But most of all, he wants you to have peace. He wants you to be happy. And he even gives us some instruction in Philippians 4:8. He said, I want you to think on some things. Think on some good things. Think on things, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report. If there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. So what he's telling us here is think on some happy things, some pleasant things. What makes you happy? What makes you smile? Is it a big sunny day, or, is it hanging out with your friends? Is it going to the mall? Is it taking a walk? Whatever it may be. Is it going to the park? Is it seeing a baseball game? What is it that makes you happy? Think on some happy times. What makes you happy? Just sitting back and kicking back, watching the sunrise. If that makes you happy, think on those things. Think on family. Things that make you happy, so that when you're thinking on these things, then you don't think so much on the things that were stressing you before, the things that you're going through that God will fix for you if you allow him to. So again, you can overcome. You can overcome the power of God and giving it to God, just like David did. Look at all that stuff David went through. When was the last time someone was running, chasing you, and trying to kill you? When was the last time you had to pretend you were crazy to keep from being killed? When was the last time you had to pretend you were on a secret assignment to get food and stuff that you needed? Huh? When was the last time you had a challenge to face a giant? David went through all of that. But your story, what you're going through, is not compared to what he went through. But everything God is concerned about. If he's concerned about David, he's concerned about you. So just encourage you tonight in this meditation moment that you can overcome. And I just thank the Lord again for being here tonight. And I thank the Lord for this ministry and allowing me to do this first podcast. And we will see you on next month with another meditation moment here with Live in the Word with Pastor Dedra. If you also like to support our ministry, you may do so through PayPal. And at this time, we will just say good night and God bless. Thank you.